Welcome to the Sports Car Lessons Podcast. I'm your host, Big Ken. Whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on a streaming service, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. You'll be notified whenever I drop any new content. Welcome. Thanks for being here. Shout out to Anthony at Sack Cards for being on last week, on the last episode. Great episode. If you missed any part of that, definitely go back and give it a listen. Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. Obviously, I record this on Sundays, right? Trying to record a little early today so we can indulge in some festivities, some Mother's Day festivities today. It's cold and rainy here in Connecticut, so it'll definitely all be indoors. Yesterday was a nice day. I spent that day on the road. I talked last week about doing a local show here in Connecticut on Saturday. And on Friday, trying to get things together, I saw something on Facebook mentioned of a show in Marlborough, Mass, at the Solomon Pond Mall. I knew the flipping card show was this weekend too, was also on Saturday. So I kind of looked at it and I saw that they're both almost in a straight line for me from where, coming from Connecticut. So I called an audible. I got up early Saturday morning. I drove. The flipping show is actually further away from me. I drove to that show, and then I went to the mall show on the way home. And actually, the timing worked out well because the flipping show started at 8:30, and the mall show started at 11. So it was a good enough time that I could take in both shows. I did the flipping show once before. It was the only time I'd ever been there. I set up there. I shared a table with Jordan at Zips Cards, and I remember it being a great show. I wasn't a fan of the drive, and when you set up at a show, and one thing that was kind of cool about that show is I think it ends at 1:30. Right. So it's still, especially on a Saturday, and I think I probably mentioned this before. I like the idea of a show's ending early, to get home early. But I mean, I know that really probably affects people coming to the show and the sales of the show and things like that. Right. Because, people have something going on in the morning. By the time 12 o'clock comes or 12:30, you're like, oh, forget it. I mean, I'm kind of the same way in a local show that ends, if I don't plan it out and I don't get over there early, I'll never make it if it ends early. Anyways, with this show, like I said, I remember it being a great show, and wasn't a fan of the drive. So I figured I could get up there early, and get out of there early to avoid the traffic. Because when I went the last time, stayed till 1:30, trying to get home at 2, 3 o'clock on a Saturday, coming out of in Massachusetts I don't know, it's hard to say. I'm not looking at a map, but I know it's close to Boston. I know it's not in Boston by any means. But that show started at 8:30. I got there at 9. And I realized that this room was bigger when I went in because I knew a couple of dealers that were going to be there. And when I set up, I remember where their tables are. And that's the type of show that you're doing. Once you're doing this show, you have the same table. So when I kind of walked in, I didn't see. And then somebody said to me right away, they're like, oh, no, this is the first time they expanded this room here. So I don't know how long the show has been going on, but this is only the first time I showed up to walk it, only my second time there. I showed up to an expanded room. Saw some familiar faces there. I saw Tom at Kirill, Recognize Real. Actually did a deal with Tom. I'll share that a little later. I saw my guy Sly, Hard Hitting Card Shows. Luke, Low Pop Card Shop. My guy Adam from the Cardboard Association. I haven't seen Adam in a while, so it was good to see Adam and catch up with him. And my guy Mateus at M Football, MFUTBOL 225. He gave me, we got to talking. I have a lot of, women's soccer base cards that I had. At one point, I was thinking I was just going to find somebody to give them to get rid of them, but he gave me some good ideas to move the cards. So I'm going to give it a try, see what happens on that. So I appreciate his advice there. The show had decent traffic. I was hoping, my goal going into the show is always trying to find some football because that's my lane, and also some Caitlin Clark cards, some Angel Reese cards, maybe some other women's soccer or some WNBA. They're very hard to come by at a lot of shows. People only have one or two cards in their case, and I understand that. I talk about this all the time. I've got boxes and boxes of that stuff here, but I don't put it in it's valuable space in your case, as that shows. So you want to put in there what people are coming for. And at some point, I'm hoping that I can have a section there in the case that can be, just strictly, women's soccer or WNBA. But right now, we're just not there yet. Uh, it's a weird time for football right now. I been talking about this all along, just trying to find cards in that sweet spot, right? Like from the 300 to 600, kind of like in that price range, because that's kind of like cards that at today's comps you can get into, and they've got room to move up, but it's also considered somewhat liquid cards. This is what people are buying at the shows. It's easy. It's not a big commitment, and I understand because most people they're buying to flip the card. So if you're coming in and buying an expensive card, it's a big commitment and you're taking a chance. If you're in these lower cards, maybe the profit is not as high, but there's less risk in it too. So that as a dealer, putting the cards in my case gives me more cards. I mean, I could go out and buy one card for $2,000, right? Or I can go out and buy 5 cards or 4 cards that equal that same amount, but it's going to put more cards in my case, fill up my case a little more, and make it more affordable for the people who are buying too. So that's my mindset. That's what I'm looking for. The problem now is most people are just overpriced. They're priced over comps on the cards because they're thinking like I'm putting these cards in my case, and what people are telling me, who have been telling me, oh, why are you keeping your cards at home? Put them in your case, put your price on it, and that's what your price is. If they don't want to pay it, then they don't want to pay it. Uh, and I mean, I understand both views of that, right? I just understand that now we're getting closer and closer to where football is on the verge of really popping, right? And people are starting to put those cards in their case, but it doesn't do most people any good if those cards are priced over comps, if they're just overpriced in general. I was at a table where the dealer was making a deal with a kid, probably like 18, 19-year-old kid. So they had a 4 or 5 cards. They were going through them, and the kid was going through his phone, pulling up all that. He came up with an offer. It was probably like around 80%. The counter offer was closer to 90%. I think they met somewhere around 88%, which sounded typical, sounded fair at a card show, right? So they got the deal done, and I was interested in the card, so I was kind of hanging around for a minute. And the dealer said, the kid was taking the cards he was putting in his case, and the dealer said, "What do you have in your case? Is there anything in there you're selling?" And the kid said, "Yeah, everything in here is for sale." He opened it up and he turned the card around. The dealer started going through, and I could see his face lighting up. He was pulling out some cards, and he says, "Where do you need to be on this card, and this card, and that card?" And the kid says to him, "Oh, just so you know, I'm at 100% comps on all my cards. I can't go any less than 100%." Okay, the dealer said, "Good to know." Put everything back in and kind of handed him his case back to him. As the kid walked away, he looked at me, shook his head. He's like, "It's like, to come to I'm the guy who paid for the table, right? I'm the guy here, and you come to me. I'm selling at 88%, and you open your case up and you tell me you're at 100%. Bottom line." He says, "Do people pay 100% for those cards?" Eh, I thought to myself, y- you know, for the hobby math to work, right? Somebody's got to pay 100%. Somebody's got to pay over 100%, right? Um, it's interesting that the kid showed up at the show prepared to pay 80% on cards. You know, this is his business plan, right? I'm gonna pay 80%, I'm gonna put him in my case, and I'm gonna ask for 100%. Now, one thing was the case was full of cards, so I'm not sure if the kid actually sells, many of those cards, or he has another outlet. He has somewhere else he's moving these cards, he's selling these cards. I have no idea. Never even had a conversation with the kid, but, I just observed all this going on. But that would be the only I mean, I thought to myself, the hobby math doesn't add up. I mean, I thought this to myself for a long time. You know, everybody's showing up at a show. No one wants to pay 100% comps, right? I talk about paying 100% comps on a card that's off season. So if somebody wants to put that card in their case in December and January and February and even into March, that the comps are way down, I'm willing to pay strong on the card. And a lot of times on that card, and I've talked about this, I go back and look, what did this card sell for during the season? What did this card sell for last summer? Right? If it's not a rookie. And I can kind of gauge how much this card will probably go back up come June or July. So I'm willing to do that, but that math would make sense for me. I'm willing to make that investment, take that card, bring it home, hold on to it, wait for it to mature, and then put it back out there and make my profit there. Um, but what about the people who are flipping the cards, just buying the cards to flip the cards? Because I know people think that dealers can magically buy these cards at 70% or 75%, to make it worthwhile to sell at 85 or 88%. But maybe some people can get into the cards that cheap. Right? And I know if you wait long enough on certain cards, it ends up being you're buying at 70% of comps when the price is gonna go up to 100% at some point, when it comes back into season, or if there's some hype built around the player. Uh, but I know it's getting harder and harder to buy. I mean, everyone I've talked to this weekend, every dealer I saw that I knew at the flipping show said, I was hoping to buy this weekend, but I can't make deal. I can't buy anything. There's nothing coming to my table really to buy. It's not like it used to be. And for whatever reason, I mean, I know people ask me, they're like, "Oh, I saw, I heard you were talking about that uh um, Stanford show." I almost said Norwalk again. I was talking about that Stanford show, and they said, "You said it was a good show," and I said, "Yeah." Like, "Oh, I talked to a bunch of people and said no, it wasn't." I said, "Well, it just depends on what you were doing there." And he said to me immediately, he said, "Oh, the repackers cleaned you out." I said, "No, did not clean me out. I did not have what the repackers wanted." But what happens is the repackers cleaned everybody else out, and I'm sitting here with a full case of cards, and people are coming to a show to buy. They're finding what they, the rebackers are not buying the very low stuff. They're not buying the high end stuff. And then there's a bunch of stuff in the middle, that may not be what the basketball and the football are what they're buying, right? So I did very well at the show. And I know other people I was with that were, not only with the repackers, but just selling, that they did very well. But it was not a great buying show. It wasn't a show that all kinds of great cards were showing up, it used to be. And I know I can hear, a lot of people are going to make comments saying, "Oh, poor dealer can't buy, cheap cards." But, it was part of the business plan. Right. This was the business plan. You would, at the shows, the cards would come up. You'd be able to buy these cards, whether you were dropping them back in your case or you were going to, do something like I do, hold on to these cards along the way. Um, but it's not just me. It was the whole business plan for most people to be able to buy cards at this show. The buying signs are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. They're trying to attract people, to come to their table. But the people who are knowledgeable that are selling or coming there to sell, they know who's paying the higher percentages, right? And you start showing up to dealers' tables, and I've done this. I've been on the other end of this where I've gone to walk a show, and said, "Hey," they say, "You selling?" "Yeah, here, look at some cards." And I got some ridiculously low offers on cards. And I thought to myself, no wonder why people, talk about, you know, getting lowballed by dealers at shows. Because I mean, even I know, which I do this all the time. Even I felt a little offended by the offers that I was getting on cards. So, uh, everyone everyone is having trouble buying right now. For whatever reason, everyone is having trouble buying right now. And I'm starting to see the football cards coming out in the cases, but the prices are very high right now. And even when try to negotiate somewhat on it, but if they're that overpriced, and then I look some of those up too, right? I try to see w- w- what are they basing their price on? Right? Where if the last comp on a card, I'm just gonna make up some numbers, is $300 and they're asking 575 for the card. Where is the almost doubling the price of the card? Where are they coming in at? And I'll go back and I'll look back at some of the comps, and I'll see that card hasn't sold or never sold for that much money. So I'm not sure if they're expecting a big deal with this card moving forward, or they just didn't get into this card very well and they're trying to, get out of it much higher than what it is. Uh, I've given up the flipping part, like buying something at a show. Every now and then I'll go out. I'll go out before the show starts. If I can find something that I'll buy, that I'll know that I'll have a better luck selling a card, especially if it's a female player, because people know that I do a lot with the women's stuff. So if I can find, some Caitlin Clarks or Angel Reese or Trinity Rodman or Sophia, anything like that, if I find them at a show, of course I could take them and put them in my case. But for the most part, I gave up on the flipping game, because to me it just didn't make that much sense, right? Card shows up. If I buy a card at a show for $100, or say it's $100 card and I buy it at $85, right? It's $100 card still. What is somebody going to offer me that for that card? They're going to offer me $80. That's where we're going to start. Am I going to be lucky to get $90 for that card? Right? That's probably the most I'm going to get on it. So is that $5 or $10? Is that worth the risk? Well, it depends on the card. If it's a card that I really like, and I won't mind having in my case, I may take a chance. But if it's a card that is just a pure flip that I really don't care about that card, I'm probably just not going to do it. And I'll tell them too. It just doesn't make sense for me to buy this card to maybe make $5 on it. Just doesn't make sense. So that's, that flipping part of the game is just, I need to be more prepared. I need to show up prepared to a show, and not rely on purchasing cards in the room that I could try to resell for a few bucks each in my case. And if everybody's, buying at 80% or 85%, is there any value left in the cards at all? Somebody has to take the hit. Somebody has to overpay on this card in order to reset this card so it can start being sold again for 80 or 85%. I mean, that's the only way it can happen. Um, if I buy $100 card at $85 and the next eBay comp is 85, now that card is worth what, 70? So, right? So if it gets sold for 70, then what is it? Now it's a $65 card. Right? At some point, that price has got to get back up to $100, right? It needs to, in order for that card to keep going, because if not, it's going to go the wrong direction. It's just going to keep going down and down and down. Um, so the hobby math just doesn't seem to work on these cards unless we take into consideration that somebody has to overpay on the card and take a loss in order to reset that card back, so then it could start going again. And I know there's more than one card. I mean, obviously, I understand pop counts and people are selling these cards all over, but I just can't imagine that, people are selling a card on eBay for $100, and then at the show it's being paid $80, right? So why am I going to go to buy it on eBay for 100 if I can pick it up at a show at 80, right? And now if it gets sold on eBay for $80, somebody on eBay says I'm going to do it for 80, just like I just said, now it's 70, right? Somebody has to rebuy that card at a higher price for the value to maintain its value. Somebody's going to do it. Doesn't mean that, and if they're doing it to buy it to put it into their collection, then 100% perfect. Then that person there's that's what says, well, somebody didn't take a loss. They just wanted to pay for this card. This is the card they wanted. They wanted to put it in their collection. And they don't care if they paid 70, 80, or 90 or $100 on the card. Last week at that Stanford show, people were talking about repackers paying 92%. But at some point, these cards need to be recycled back into the market, right? I mean, just because the repackers are coming in and buying these cards and they're leaving the show, they're coming back into the market, whether it's on eBay, at card shows, is it being in the repack market, in Razes, in breaks. They're somehow they're coming back into the market, and then the pricing is starting all over again on these cards. But is anybody ever paying 100%? Who are the people paying 100%? Is it just the people on eBay? So somebody who pays something on eBay or buys something on eBay, they've created the comp. I mean, this is how we've designed this, right? That and what they paid is now the comp, is now the 100% comp. So are we to imagine that the people on eBay are always overpaying for the card? Because if the card is $100 and I put that card in my case and the last one sold on eBay for $100, no one's going to come up and pay me $100 for the card. I mean, somebody might pay me that, but most likely I'm going to start getting at $65 and $70 and then $75, something like that. Along this card's journey, right? No matter what happens, whether it's the first person that bought it or the last person that bought it, somebody's got to lose on it in order for this card to remain value. To have value, somebody has to lose on this card. And another dealer said to me at the show last week in Stanford, after I bought that Jalen Hurts card, he came over and he's like, that card came to my table. The kid wanted too much. What did you pay? And I told him. He says, you paid too much. But then he said, you'll probably do all right on it. The best thing that could happen is somebody who doesn't know cards buys that card from you. That definitely made me step back and think about what he just said. I mean, there's the part of the hobby we never talk about. New people or people who don't know cards coming into the hobby or in the hobby that really we should try to be educating, but instead dealers will just prey on them instead, right? Didn't sit with me right. That comment did not sit with me right. And I'm trying to explain to him that as long as I hold this card to the right time, the value will go up. Like, I don't need to beat somebody on this card. It's not like I'm going to flip this card tomorrow. If somebody's willing to pay more, right? But understanding what they're getting, right? Because, we're not just talking about just a regular card. We're talking about an iconic card. I mean, it's a low pop. I think it was a pop 8 card, right? But realistically, I have to sit on that card for at least a month or 2 months before that value will come back up. That may be a card that may have to go all the way into August before the value will come up on that card, right? But I mean, his idea was, look, I just sell cards. I don't care if I'm making $5, $10, 15, 20, 100, 1,000. I just keep selling. I mean, that's my business. That's what I do. I don't have time for cards to mature, right? That is his business. He's there. I'm here. I'm at the show. I need to make money. If I buy the card for 10, I'll sell it for 15, like or 20 or 25 or whatever I can get for that card, right? I mean, this is his business model. But you heard the expression people have used in the hobby for a few years now, that if everybody buys a card under comps, the card's going to go to zero. But somehow they never do they? Whether somebody's there to buy the card, trade the card, put the card in a break, get the card in a Raz, put the card in a repack, whatever is happening on this card's journey, it just never goes to zero, does it? That card circle just keeps going around. Although the math doesn't add up, because we never talk about the people who take the losses on the cards, but the values always stay the same. At this flipping show, I made a couple deals. I bought two of these, two identical cards from my guy Tom. Um, they're the Bowman U now, Caitlin Clark. I'm holding them up if you're on YouTube. PSA 10. Happy he had just got them back. He had just got these back from PSA the day before the show, so I was happy. I went up there. I'm happy to have those cards. I picked up 3 identical cards. Bowman Sapphire. They're all Caitlin Clark. They're all PSA 10s. And again, all these cards, not over the top cards, all these cards under $100. Some at 100, some at, $40, like that. So definitely reasonably priced cards. Another Bowman U, Caitlin Clark. I think this is the Big Ten champions. I'll hold this one up. Another PSA 10. And the last one I picked up was an Angel Reese auto. And it, it's funny on this card. The auto is on the sticker, but the sticker wasn't really centered in the card. So it looks like the auto is off, but it's really the way they put the sticker on was a little off. But still a nice card. It's the greatness awaits. I'd like to open it up and just peel the sticker up, move it over, and put it over. But happy to have these cards. And these cards will go in my case next week up in at the Fenway show. But more than likely, they'll probably I'll have I don't know. And I say this because last week I sold out every Caitlin Clark card I had. It may happen again this weekend. These cards will be in my case this weekend up at Fenway. But if not, really looking forward to, setting up a lot of the women's stuff at the National this year. So I'm going to keep buying this stuff. I talked about it. I kind of put my brakes on the Caitlin Clark thinking, that these cards are going to, no, still selling very strong. In fact, after I made a deal on one of these cards, and the guy standing next to me, and this has happened at a number of shows now, said to me, I was going to buy that if you didn't. He said, those are, Caitlin is so hot right now. He was also sets up as a dealer. And he says, I just can't put enough Caitlin Clark cards in my case. They just sell out. So happy to have them. These were the deals that I made. I felt that people I talked about this earlier, felt high on their cards. I tried to negotiate when I felt somebody was reasonably priced. I tried to negotiate a little. And a lot of times I heard people saying, look, this is what I paid for the card. I need to make a little money on it. But the problem was they were over comps, $20, $30, $40, maybe even $100 over comps. So really it just didn't make sense for me. Some of those, if I'm buying just to hold on to, that was okay. But if it's something I'm buying that I'm going to want to put in my case next week, I'm hoping I've got so many orders out at PSA. I'm hoping, and so many in assembly that have been in the assembly phase and finished with a check mark in assembly. So the assembly has been finished, for weeks now. So I'm hoping something pops this week so I can get I have some, cards to put in my case. But, if it doesn't, then I want to make sure I have some things to put in there. So from this show, I had a great time hanging out with friends, made a few pickups. I left there. I headed to the Cardboard Promotions Big Sports Cards and Memorabilia Show at Solomon Pond Mall in Marlborough, Mass. This show is definitely much smaller. I think their autograph guests were the big draw. I saw a lot of people walking around with memorabilia they wanted to get autographed. I saw my guy Neil there. It was good to see him. I was on my way in. He was on his way out. We stopped and chatted for a little bit. Best way to describe this was older cards, but not vintage. I mean, there was some vintage, but it was like older cards, but not vintage cards, and a lot of low end slabs and discount boxes. I started chatting with this older fellow there about about the hobby and cards, and we're having a good conversation. And he mentioned the National, and he's been setting up there for many years, and how the National used to be mostly vintage and baseball and no football, because of course when you walk up to the table, people say, "Oh, what are you looking for?" "Oh, I'm looking for football." He says, "No football." He says, I can't take my football out." He says, "It used to be football. There was no football at the National. The football cards would come out August 1st, when that's when people started putting their football cards in the cases, right?" He says, "So even though the hobby has changed," he said, "I haven't, right? Not until August 1st. I am not putting football out there, not until August 1st, not in my cases." And I started laughing because we see a lot of these people in the hobby, old school OGs, right? Who are set in their ways in the hobby, and they're not willing to change. We see this at a lot of the smaller shows, and maybe at a few of the bigger shows too. And some of these guys at these smaller shows, their cases are set up that they don't never even take the cards out, right? They just stack the cases up, break them home, and take them back out and put them right back on the table again. The case, all the cards are still in the same place, right? uh, but it was a great conversation with him. He had no social media, so I don't even know if he'll listen, but I just thought it was a fun little thing to share. I was in and out of this show pretty quick. I had 0 pickups at the show. It was just in the bottom floor of the mall, so I kind of just walked up one side, down the other. And as I was leaving, it was really starting to get busy. They were starting to line up because people were coming into they were going to start autographing. So I think there was a little bit of a frenzy going on there too as well. But that was it. That was my hobby Saturday. Headed home, and I'm here with you on Sunday morning, and I'll be back Thursday with a brand new episode. I want to thank everyone for tuning in, and if you like what you hear, please definitely subscribe, and most importantly, tell a friend and spread the word. And until next time, take care of yourselves and everyone around you.